count in for me? 1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3.
Yeah, we're good to go. Yeah. So I'm going to start. We'll start now then, if you're ready for that.
Sure.
All right. I'm going to walk a mile with Patti Fedrau this morning. How are you doing, Patti?
I'm doing very well, thanks.
Yeah.
And how about you?
Yeah, doing fine, thank you. I want to talk to you about your new project, Nouns, but I also want to talk to you about some of your musical history because you've had, a fairly interesting one. You performed and recorded under the name Patti Lane for years. Maybe talk about that first, just briefly,
Okay.
and we'll move to maybe talk about Prairie Burn a little bit, and then to the your recent project Nouns.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess it's hard to be brief with something that lasted a few years. So when I moved to France, and I had been singing with friends at parties and things. And one of those friends introduced me to some producers, and they introduced me to some songwriters, and I basically made an album phonetically in French because I had just moved there.
Right.
So I wasn't, I didn't speak, I skipped out of all my French classes in school, sadly, and hadn't quite understood the concept that everything you do will be useful to you at some point in your life.
Yeah. If we'd known then what we know now, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I basically blew that one. I had to learn French as I went, and so half the time I didn't really know what I was singing.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. Huh.
But I was very lucky because the man who was my producer and became a good friend as well, he ended up introducing me to, he was the #1 songwriter in France called Didier Barbelivien.
Yeah.
And then there was a couple other guys that were also quite famous songwriters. One of them was named Pierre Dolenouet, and he wrote songs for Edith Piaf.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
So we're talking, quite famous.
Yeah. And you were. It was sort of more pop music, I guess. Eh? Would you call it pop music?
Yeah, I mean the downside of that is basically they were writing songs for me as they saw me.
Right.
And so it didn't always fit with how I saw myself or wanted to see myself in myself,
Yeah.
And I mean they were trustworthy, those people, but there were other people along the way. The music business is a bit of a difficult business, as you know.
Right.
And often, you get screwed. Basically.
Yeah, for sure.
I was so happy just to be in the position of being able to make an album, and that people, wanted to invest money in my career.
Right.
That I didn't feel at that time, I didn't have enough self-worth probably to sort of stand up to them. And, I might say, well, I don't really like that song, or I don't, but they would say, just trust us,
Right.
Go along with it. So I did go along with a lot of stuff that I probably wouldn't have gone along with now.
Right.
Or as we went, I started learning how to stand up for myself, kind of thing.
Sure. Yeah, you were more of an entertainer and performer than an artist, I would suppose, at that point.
Yeah, because even though I've always written stories and I've always written poems or songs, when I was when I was with them, it was like they were in control, basically.
Right.
So the first song that became quite well known, and it was written by Didier Barbelivien, called Une espèce de Canadienne, which means a kind of Canadian.
Right.
Because everybody in France, people would say, "Where are you from?" And I'd say Canada, and they'd say, "Oh, you're from Quebec," or you're from Montreal."
Right.
For the French, there isn't an English-speaking Canada at all.
Right. So they could relate to you because they connected Canada with Quebec and French-speaking language and culture. Yeah. So then. So what year was that? Was that in the 80s, Patti?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was. I believe it came out in 1982.
Yeah.
I could be wrong, but I think so.
So, and how long did you stay in France then?
Well, I was there for 10 years, and so I released an album and some singles, and went through some changes, and then at one point I met someone who was also an artist, and we had a baby. We got together first before we had the baby.
Sure.
And then so my son was born in France, and so that sort of shifted everything. And then at one point, his father and I weren't together, but I really wanted him. His first language was basically French because he grew up.
Sure.
Or he was, 5 years old. So then I started gravitating towards England because I didn't want to take him too far away from his French family, but at the same time, I wanted him to have an English education as well as a French education.
Sure.
Yeah.
So then you went to London.
Then I went to London, and I was married to an actor, and I was making jewelry, and I sort of stopped singing for a bit.
I see, yeah. And then, so what year did you come back to Canada?
Not until 2000. Most of my moves are connected with relationships. So I think it was 2009 to 2010. I met him in 2009, so it was 2010.
Yeah. And so Prairie Burn was recorded here in Canada, correct?
No,
it wasn't. Okay.
The whole album was recorded when I was still working in London. I was working as a therapist, and one of the guys that I worked with, he was a producer and played guitar, and he played the lute and all kinds of old-fashioned instruments. But his name is Francis Licorice, and so he produced the album Prairie Burn, and he previous to that, he had done a lot of touring with different people, including Kim Wilde. I don't know if you remember her.
No, I don't. But
she had a song called "Kids of America."
Okay.
And the kids of America.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Anyway, he produced the album, but it coincided right when we were like finishing up the album. That's when I had already met my husband to be, and we had known each other a long time ago as well, but we hadn't seen each other for a long time.
Sure.
And that was coincided with me moving back to Canada.
Right.
For a couple of years, basically.
Yeah.
And so I didn't time that one very well. The release of that one.
Oh, I see the release. Okay, yeah, of course. Yeah.
Because I was in the middle of nowhere.
Well, so that album must have been basically a series of recollections of time in Canada. Is that a fair statement, or?
You mean a Prairie
Prairie
Burn?
Burn, yeah.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah,
Some of the
yeah.
songs were um, but they developed when I was living mostly in England. So and mostly with British songwriters, like co-writing with people.
Right, right.
So really, there was a British uh, tint, and a lot of the stories were things that happened there.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's move forward now to nouns. Tell me about the title.
Well, because a lot of the songs, quite a few of the songs, I'm either talking about places or people.
Right.
So I thought, and because I taught English when I lived in China. I lived in China for 8 years with my husband.
Yep.
So this is after I moved back to Canada.
Right.
We moved to China, and I taught English as a second language, and so I thought it was also appropriate for that.
Sure. Well, the songs, I've listened to them, quite thoroughly, and they strike me as being journalistic in some ways.
That's interesting that you would say that. Yeah, I mean, I've always liked. I used to love Ernest Hemingway, for example.
Interesting,
because
yeah.
of his style of writing.
Right, right. It's like you're responding to something in the moment, and then that generates a series of ideas that become a song.
Yeah, totally. That's exactly it.
Yeah, yeah. But yet there are some philosophical underpinnings as well. I mean, they're not just throwaway songs, right? They're from Survived, you say, I put a face over my heart, right? Yeah. Talk about that a little bit. What does that mean?
Well, that one I was inspired. I wrote that one with Carrie Leonard, who I also wrote quite a few other songs that were on Prairie Burn. And this one, it sort of developed because I had a friend in Canada who was annoyed with me because I didn't write her personal letters. Because when I first moved to Europe, I would be sending postcards to people with like quick little messages,
sure,
but nothing deep.
Right, right.
So, a couple of my friends got annoyed and upset with me because of that. And so I started, and I had started to write her a letter. And then I just thought, but to get her to understand where I'm coming from, I'm going to have to tell her the whole story, and the whole story is going to take a long time, et cetera, et cetera. And so I ended up writing the song instead of writing her a letter.
I see. Okay, right. Of course. Yeah, yeah. So did you send her a special track?
No, I never told her.
She doesn't know. Probably doesn't know to this day, right?
Probably not. She the person. Well, there's a couple of people, but one of them lives in Mexico. But I have seen her since. She's not annoyed at me anymore, so that's good.
So let's just focus a minute for a couple of the songs. Saskatchewan Sky. So I mean, you kind of say you want to. This is where you want to die. You're kind of done with the big city life. Like that song tells me that you're kind of done with the big city life, and you really just want to be a country girl or something, or you love the idea of a small town, not the big city. Is that fair? Or?
Well, I've come back to my roots, basically. I was born in Saskatoon, but I grew up in Watrous.
Yep.
In a small town, and Manitou Beach was a very big part of my childhood. And we didn't even realize how lucky we were to have a lake, 3 miles. I can't remember how many kilometers it is, away from where we were growing up. And every summer, we would do different things. And so when I was living in Europe, you can't really see the sky. All the streets are really
Right.
small,
Right.
and so I would come back home, and I would be amazed by the sky. It was like I'd never seen it before.
Right.
And so that was kind of what prompted starting to write that song. And then I was just thinking about, every time I came back, different things like riding the freedom that you feel when you're riding a bike or, as a kid, just going swimming and not really worrying about anything and eating an ice cream and, and so, I think I do like big cities as well, but I found I was recently in London, and I did find it a bit busy,
Yeah.
Like a bit noisy, and like you really had to muster up a lot of effort to get from A to B or organize things, etc.
It wasn't simple.
No, and so I feel like I've come full circle back to a place where I didn't think that I would end up coming back to, because I did love big cities for a long time.
Right. So there's a song about your mother. She was always there.
Yes.
What a lovely tribute.
Well, there's actually 3 different versions of that song, but there's only one on the album. It started off as a sort of folk song, and then Simon Yan, who's the person who produced this album, Nouns, he was a former student when we were in China.
Oh, I see. Oh.
And I organized. They were kind of like coffee houses, but with tea instead of coffee. And the students would have to audition, and they would have maybe 1 or 2 songs, and they had to find somebody that would play with them. They couldn't do karaoke.
Right.
They didn't have to write the song, but I encouraged people to write their own songs. So it was part of, learning English. And I got to know all the best musicians in the school. It was a big school, 2,000 kids.
Wow, yeah.
And some of these kids that were my right-hand man or woman, they, went to Berkeley, College of Music. They were really, really good musicians. And Simon was one of them. He was the longest, and he would come back. He's now a teacher. He's 25 years old now.
Yeah. Well, it must have been fun.
He produced this album.
It must have been fun to work with him.
Yes, it was.
Yeah. So is he teaching here then?
No, he's teaching in China.
He's teaching in China.
He went to school in Wisconsin.
I see. Okay.
Or he went to university. But I was going to say, so the song about my mom, the first time we recorded it, I showed him the song, and I was in the middle of invigilating an exam at the school, and he was back on vacation. And he said, I'll just lay down some tracks, some drum tracks, and some bass while you're invigilating the exam. So I come back from the exam, and I said, how's it going? And he goes, well, it's gone a little punk. And he made this super rock song. And it's hard to imagine if you listen to the piano version.
No doubt. Yeah, no doubt.
But I don't know if my mom was that fond of the rock part of it.
And I must say, sorry, go ahead.
No, so the tribute to her was, then he's playing the piano on that track.
I see, yeah. So I was going to ask you about the musicians. So who are the musicians on this album?
So the main one is Simon. He produced it, and he's an excellent musician who can play any instrument. Like, he's amazing.
Yeah.
So he because, as I said, he and I had worked together on some tracks before. So that process is quite quick with him.
Yeah.
And then I thought, well, I would really like the bass player from the band that I'm in, Patti and the Stack.
Yes.
And Jonathan Moore Wright. So I got him to come and lay down the bass lines. And then at the time we were changing drummers, so I didn't really have a drummer. So the drums it's not a real drummer.
I see. Yeah. Right.
It's Simon.
Simon. Yeah. Right.
But then, and then I wanted Everett Van Olst, who plays lead guitar in Patti and the Stack, to lay down some guitar. So between him and Simon, they
nice.
The solos.
Well, the production values are great.
And my sister Wendy, who I'm in another band with called Wild Prairie.
Right. She did some harmony work.
She did harmony on a few songs, I think 3 songs maybe.
Yeah.
And then there's one song that we did with Everett and Brian Paul DG.
Oh yeah, right.
So Everybody Needs Love. That song.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And that was live in a studio.
Right.
Studio audience.
Yeah. Oh, no kidding. Nice. Yeah. That's great.
So I'm amazed we got through it without making a mistake, but we did.
It has a nice feel about it. It's kind of like a '60s love song, like a kind of a hippie anthem,
Yeah. Well, I wrote it during COVID.
Oh, no kidding. Yeah.
Because there was a lack of love in the air.
Yes. Right. Yeah. For sure. Well, listen, we're at their 22-minute mark here now, Patti.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So you have some shows coming up?
A few. I've got one tomorrow, but I don't know when this goes out.
Yeah,
so it's probably going to be gone.
Yeah, it'll be over. Stuff that's a month from now. Have you got anything a month out?
Well, there's something on March 29th where Patti and the Stack are at the Legion.
Yeah.
It's the Nutana Legion, so it's near the. I think it's this curling rink up there.
Yeah. All right.
That end.
Right.
Not the Legion, but anyway, it's at the Legion on the March 29th.
Yep.
And then Studio 12, May 25th.
Right. Saskatchewan homegrown.
With the whole band.
Yeah.
And June 28th at Danceland in Manitou Beach.
Oh yeah, boy, talk about going home again, eh?
Yeah. So we played there last year, and it was my 50th. What do you call it? Graduation.
Oh, no kidding! Oh boy.
Yeah. And so they wanted to. So then some people from the next year were there, and they wanted us to come back this year.
Nice.
So this is our 3rd year there.
Nice. Yeah. Good fun. Yeah.
And so, there's lots of other things in the pipeline, but they're not confirmed yet.
Sure.
So I'm not going to say those ones.
Well, that sounds great. Well, that's good. Well, thank you very much. Any closing remarks about the album? How do you feel about it in general?
I'm very happy with it. When Prairie Burn came out, I wasn't happy with all of it because I wasn't there for some of the end
final
part
mixes,
and the mixing and everything.
Yeah.
So this one I'm very happy with.
Yeah.
I'm not very good at knowing what to do with it, but I'm just hoping. Some people have been playing it on different radio stations, so
right.
I hope I can get it out there.
Yeah, basically. Nice. All right. Well, listen, we'll close this off now. I'm going to stop recording.
Okay. Well, I just want to thank you before you close it. You've given so much to the Saskatoon Music Society, and we are very grateful that you are here now.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. Thanks a lot, Patti.
Really,
Yeah.
you're a great musician. So
Well, thank you.
you thank you very much for
Well,
everything you do.
thanks so much for saying that.